Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined as always by Chris Bouguet. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Rachel. How's it going?
It's good. What you got for me this week?
I'm packing my bags this week because I have the opportunity to go to Leeds in England. So Communication Matters is a conference that happens out there. I think it's a nonprofit, or it's a charity organization. I'm not exactly sure what the branding is in Britain. Here in the United States, we might have not-for-profit or nonprofit. I don't know how it works over there, but I know it's a charity. And they have a conference that's coming up, and they've invited me to participate in that conference as sort of as a person on the street going around having interviews. You did something like that a number of years ago at one of the ASHA conventions or ASHA conferences where you either talk to people or people came up to you and you talk to them. And so that's what's happening. I'm going over to Communication Matters. I'm going to talk to different AAC users, different supporters, different educators, and we're going to collect a bunch of audio that we're going to come back here and play on the podcast. I'm super excited about it. I've never been to England. Let's start with that. My wife has the opportunity to come with me. And so we're super excited to go and spend some time in Leeds and then kind of go around England and maybe even get a chance to go to France. We're not even sure yet. It's right around the corner. We don't have anything booked other than that we are going. It all kind of came together last minute. We were like, yes, let's do this. And it's all Communication Matters is all about AAC. And so I'm really excited to meet AAC users from a different country. Now, in fact, you know some of them. We've had some of them on the podcast. You know, our longtime friend, Joanna Holmes. I'm confident I'm going to meet her there. Beth Mullen is going to be there, who's also another person who's been on the podcast. At least I think they're both going to be there. I mean, I know they're both involved with Communication Matters. And so you might be hearing from them again in the podcast. And so I'm just mentioning it here, Rachel, because I think it's something to get excited about. I think it's something to look forward to listening to. The more we've talked over the years with people from around the world, the more we see that we have similar difficulties globally, similar challenges globally around helping people who are learning to become better communication partners. And so, just in society in general, amplifying what it's like to live as somebody who uses AAC. And so, So it's a credible opportunity. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to sharing the experience with you and all the listeners when I get back.
Chris, I'm so upset I'm not coming. All I want to do is be there, but I wasn't able to coordinate exactly my schedule. So I'm excited you're going to be representing the podcast, and I know you're going to have an amazing time. I actually have been to the UK multiple times, and I love it over there. It'll be a perfect time of year to go, and I'm really excited to hear about all of the interviews and to hear everything that happened.
Well, I have to say, yeah, that is the bummer part, is that you're not coming with us, because it's always more fun when we're there together and we're bantering together and we're doing these things together and we're getting pictures together. It's always better when we're together. So I'm going to miss you totally, but we'll be talking about you and thinking about you and everyone else, all the podcast listeners, and I can't wait to come back and share it with you as soon as I can.
Yes, it's going to be great. And I totally remember those. I did it at a few ASHAs. I did podcast recording, and yeah, it was really fun. It was also a lot of work. I just remember being like, everyone's like, Rachel, someone came to the booth looking for you. Rachel, I was like, whoa. Like I was in one location. And so people kind of knew where I was and came to me, and it was awesome. We got a lot of content, and it's like fun to be able to kind of share the experience of a conference and it helps their listeners feel like they were there. And I'm really excited because I feel like Communication Matters really focuses on AAC users, and that's the best way for us to learn as clinicians and people who are supporting those who use AAC for communication. And so I'm really excited to hear all the interviews, and it's going to be so fun.
Speaking of interviews, tell us about the interview today.
Yes, I had the pleasure of speaking with Brianna Hughes and Tiffany Rezvani. They are clinicians based out of Northern California. I know Tiffany from way back. She used to be based in LA, and I remember when her and I first met, she was another AAC person in Los Angeles. And I was like, wow, like, you're so rare. Like, someone else who does AAC here? And quickly after we met and became friends, she actually ended up moving to Northern California, which I was so sad about. But they both reached out because they created an AAC screening tool, and we had them on the podcast to talk all about what they created. It's a completely free resource, and we just kind of dive into the genesis of this screening tool, how they created it, how they're using it. And I think it's really valuable to think about ways that we can expedite some of our processes, especially if we're in an organization like a school, and making sure that we have no student that needs AAC that has kind of fallen through the cracks. And so I feel like a screening tool like this is really powerful. And it also just helps educate and empower people to understand what AAC is. And there's education opportunities around it. So I'm really excited to share the interview that I did with Brianna Hughes and Tiffany Rezvani.
This October, join Impact Voices at the AAC community in Arlington, Virginia. Hello, I am Lance McLemore, a board member of Impact Voices. Don't miss our second Live AAC Hangout and celebration at the Crystal Gateway Marriott on October 17th and 18th. Our theme is Building Futures Together to empower AAC users, connect policymakers, employers, and each other. Hear from AAC users who are shaping the future, explore our challenges and opportunities, and discover how we can all work together for a more inclusive world. Register today at impactvoices.org. We can't wait to see you and Ivy Live 2024.
Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Manel, joined today by Brianna Hughes and Tiffany Rezvani. You guys, I'm so excited to have you here.
We're glad to be here.
Very. Thank you for having us.
Of course. So let's start off by having you guys each introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm Brianna. I am an AAC and AT specialist. I work for a company called Communication Works, and I've been contracting with a public school district, Castro Valley Unified, for the past 9 years. And in the last couple of years, I've been joined by Tiffany.
Hi, I'm Tiffany. I am a speech pathologist and AAC specialist in California. I have my own practice called Technology Voices, and I subcontract through a company called Ascend Rehab to work in some of the public schools here in the East Bay, including Castro Valley Unified School District, where I met Brianna and have worked with her for the last 2 years.
And Tiffany, you and I know each other. We kind of go way back. You used to be in LA. And I remember when we met, and I was like, oh my gosh, another AAC person. I cannot feel so alone.
I have a very distinct memory of us meeting up in Santa Monica, close to your practice, and grabbing coffee and sitting out on the grass and chatting about all things AAC years ago.
Yes, I know. And then you moved north, and I was so sad. I was like, no, how am I supposed to refer all the kids I can't see? Like, Tiffany was so great for extra referral space. So I've missed you. I've missed you dearly. But I also I'd sometimes get referrals in Northern California, and I'm like, yes, I have my go-to girl.
True, very true.
Okay. I had that same reaction meeting Tiffany of, yay, another AAC specialist.
It's like we are kind of in this silo with, the work that we do, and we're not always interacting with people who do AAC, and it can feel kind of lonely sometimes, not having someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, talk through cases. And so when you find someone that does, this work, it's really exciting. Okay, you guys, you did something really cool, and you reached out to us and you shared all about this AAC screening tool that you guys have developed. So I was like, come on the podcast, let's talk about it. And so how did this originate? Where did this come from? Tell me about the genesis of this.
Yeah, so I was the only AAC and AT specialist in the district for a very long time. I definitely felt that loneliness that you talked about. And then as the caseload grew, I was able to convince our district that we needed more support. And my director at the time brought on Tiffany to help out with assessments. And even with her support, we were in a situation with way too many referrals, way too many assessments. And those assessments were starting to feel suspiciously repetitive. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there who can relate. So we were trying to do capacity building and to use a specific language system first approach. But our assessment process was still very much stuck in expert mode. We come in and test, and then we sort of recommend a device. And so, as I was thinking about this, I thought, if we have a low-tech tier 1, what we need is a tier 2 of direct selectors and a tier 3 of our students with more complex communication needs. And we don't want kids getting stuck in the wrong tier. We couldn't capacity build in the sense that we couldn't ask our SLPs to complete assessments, because at the time we were actually short of SLPs as well. We were having some staffing challenges. And so I thought, we need some kind of standard way of deciding that's easy to use and objective. And we have DIBELS for reading, we have UPAR for assistive technology. So could we make an AAC screening? And if we did, what would that look like? And so I had the idea of starting from a teacher interview, which is a key part of our process, and then going through some specific activities that we often use in AAC assessments. And then I called Tiffany. And I was like, hey, I've got this idea, and I need you to tell me if it's insane or maybe genius. And she was like, no, this is not insane. And within about 15 minutes on that phone call, we had the bones of what became our AAC screening, plus the outline of what we were going to say to our administrators to help convince them that this could work.
I love the second part of this. How do you convince administrators? Because I feel like that's oftentimes the roadblock that many people face when they are trying to introduce a system for AAC like this. And oftentimes, it's the SLPs or the AAC or AT specialists who kind of have this idea, or they've listened to the podcast, they've heard Chris kind of talk about the specific language system first, and it can feel hard to kind of introduce a new idea and get the buy-in from the administrators, which so I'm excited to hear that you've kind of tried to tackle that piece too, because it's not just, oh, here's this new idea. It's also like, how do we get people to buy into this idea?
Totally. When Brianna called me for that sanity check, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Just like having worked in the schools, we know that these processes are difficult, and oftentimes administrators are concerned, like, how are we going to talk to parents about this? Are you sure you can really know who qualifies for AAC, right? It was my first thought that administrators would have these questions, and I knew that Brianna and I needed to be really prepared with our research and our reasoning so that we could answer, these sorts of questions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this is a completely free resource, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Which is awesome. Thank you guys for making it so accessible. And the website is aacscreening.com, which we'll definitely include in the show notes. Let's dive into what the screening actually is. Like what when you go to the website and you download this, like what are you getting?
Yeah, so we're constantly adding to it and putting more things to go with it. We're updating our resources as we go. But what you get when you download it currently is our protocol, plus a video showing us actually doing it together. It's very informal. We laugh a lot through the whole thing because we have to pretend that one of us is a kid and one of us is the adult doing the screening. Yeah. But some kind of key features of the screening is we wanted something brief and repeatable and enjoyable for kids that is going to sort them into the different MTSS tiers and then any subgroups within those tiers. So it starts with a teacher interview, and some kids actually stop there in the process. And then there's a short of set of 3 activities with the student. And then last, we have some options to observe in the classroom if you're still feeling unsure about what to recommend. And there's guidance within the protocol about what we would recommend based on the results that you find.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it kind of lays out this process that you guys have created. I'm curious, kind of the iterations of that. I feel like anytime we're kind of developing something, we go through iterations of like, oh, like we forgot about this, or like, actually, maybe we should like double click on this. So I'm curious if how long have you guys been kind of refining this, and when did it actually start? The creation of it actually start?
We started this process back in spring of the last calendar school year. So it's
Mhm.
been a year, Brianna. That's so crazy. Wow. And we did go through a few iterations. In our first version of the protocol, our teacher screening question or interview question was whether or not the student had at least 100 spontaneous words in any language, and
Mhm.
whether or not they produce those words with at least 90% intelligibility.
Mm.
And we pretty quickly realized that that wasn't a very practical interview question for teachers, because in reality, they're not sitting there sort of counting up, the words and phrases that their students use throughout the school day. So we figured out pretty quickly that we needed to readdress at the very least that specific teacher interview question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, as you guys have been kind of utilizing this, what kind of results have you seen? Like, what are the benefits of this type of tool?
Well, I think an important clarification that I should have made earlier is that we have narrowed the field down to only screening our pre-K, TK, and kindergarten students within moderate and moderate severe self-contained classrooms. And
Mhm.
that's important both for making it legal and also making it possible for us to actually screen entire rooms full of students.
Mhm.
And so some of the benefits that we've seen has been that we don't miss kids. We are there already screening entire classrooms. And so that reduces anxiety for our staff members about referrals and also speeds up the process between when we first hear a kid's name and when we're able to provide them a device.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that the whole idea of screening is really so that we don't miss any student. And I think oftentimes with AAC, for a variety of reasons, one of which is people don't even know about AAC or don't even know, what it could do. Other reasons being myths around AAC, like kids who have verbal speech don't need it, things like
Mhm.
that. The whole benefit of the screening is just so that we don't miss students. And I like the idea of doing this when kids are really, quite young, because that is when we need to kind of start making decisions and introducing the technology that we know can be so helpful and beneficial for students learning language. And so I love this idea of a screening in general. And I definitely think that it's a way to have everyone kind of just like take a sigh of relief, like, okay, we've got it covered. Like we had the screening, the same way that you do preschool language, speech and language screenings. And, that can be super helpful, especially with young kids. There's a lot of developmental movement, I feel like, for young kids. And it's the perfect time to catch if someone or a student needs extra support when it comes to technology for communication.
Totally. We completely agree. I think it also, one of the other benefits is that it supports this idea that AAC really should be like a universal tier one support if you're thinking about a multi-tiered system of support in the school setting. It really does support that idea
Hmm.
that we're
Hmm.
trying to get AAC into every student's hands, and we know that the earlier the better. And
Hmm.
one other benefit, and I think listeners will, I think, be encouraged by this, is it really did free up a lot of time for Brianna and I,
Hmm.
and it allowed us to really streamline our training efforts.
Hmm.
So instead of spending, 8 to 10 hours, let's say, writing this really thorough and detailed report where we're trying to find the quote unquote perfect device for this particular student, our screening process is a lot faster. And with that extra time that we saved, we were able to spend more time in the classroom actually training staff, supporting teachers, meeting with parents and doing parent training, meeting with outside providers. The stuff that we know actually like really matters, you know, in our experience, our kids are ready to start. They just need models, right? They need good language modeling, and they need a team that's, you know, really ready to support. And with the extra time that we saved by doing AAC screening, we were able to not be those people who drop off the iPad and say, all right, good luck, kid. You know, we were able to be, you know, a member of the team and really support everybody when it comes to the training aspect.
Totally. I think that's one of the real benefits of the specific language system first, is that it really does put our time where it matters. And that's in actually utilizing a tool and implementing and modeling and all these skills that we know take practice. And we know that we're all kind of crunched for time. And if we can allocate time to the implementation of AAC, we're just so much better off. Our students are better off. And so often, a lot of these AAC systems and tools are all created very equally. There are specific cases with specific kids that need specific features. But generally speaking, it's like, you know, in 2024, many of these systems are very robust, have similar features. And so, you know, I just love this idea. I mean, Chris and I have talked about this at length on the podcast, but I love the idea that now you guys have created this tool, this screening tool, which I think can be just so useful, because I think people hear about the idea of a specific language system first, and then they're like, but how do I implement this? Like, how do I actually, like, you know, get this off the ground in my district or my organization? And so I love that you guys have created this kind of this guide for people to kind of do it. I'm curious, like, how has the feedback been from parents, from teachers, from administrators?
I think so far, so good. Parents absolutely love that we can get them a robust AAC device to try quickly, and that it's not a long, drawn out process. And as I mentioned, I think our staff members are a lot less stressed by referrals because they know we're going to find the kids early in the process. And for example, for part-time AAC users, screening can help us point out, hey, maybe this kid too, for our kids who have some verbal speech. So it reduces the stress on staff members to know who all might benefit from an AAC device. And then our administrators, you know, since deciding that this was okay with us, you know, okay with them for us to start doing this, we've had no issues with, you know, legal problems or high profile cases or anything like that. So far, so good.
What would you say to, because there's definitely people who are listening right now who are gung ho, like feature matching assessment for all kids. Like, we definitely have some people out there who are really, you know, digging their heels in a lot of ways, in that, you know, standard traditional AAC assessment. What would you say to someone who's listening, who's like, I don't think this is going to work. I think that this is the wrong move. What kinds of, because I'm sure there's been, you know, some pushback, because we hear that pushback too.
Well, so far, no one has actually argued with us yet. It could happen. But I would say that person is probably coming from a really good place of wanting the highest standard of care for every kid. And we want that too. So I would probably start by asking them questions like, you know, can we agree that AAC assessment takes less time for a direct selector and more time for someone with complex communication needs? And we could probably agree that what makes the most difference in a child's success with an AAC device is really the implementation, not the assessment. You could have the best device in the world, but if you don't follow through with implementing it, then it just sits on the shelf. And our literature is so clear that the earlier we provide AAC interventions, the better. So with all that in mind, it just makes sense. We need a tool that's going to let us differentiate the length of our assessment process and get a robust AAC device into a child's hands faster and get us to that good stuff of the implementation faster. And we are not proposing to stop at AAC screening for kids that truly do need a full assessment. If anything, our screening helps us find those kids faster and start testing them sooner and have more time to do a full assessment with them, even with an unbelievably heavy caseload, so that we can be really thorough in those complicated assessments and then follow through with those high quality interventions after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when I think about just my own clinical practice, most of the kids that I see are using direct selection, and it's pretty streamlined and simplified, in my opinion. I'm not necessarily using specific language system first because I'm not, in an organization where I'm doing tiers and things like that. But, I know in Southern California, Proloquo to Go is like the app that most of the school districts know, most of the ABA companies have familiarity with. And so that's kind of a huge consideration. And when I, again, think about my own clinical assessments, I'm kind of like, okay, most of the kids that come in to see me, it's like pretty streamlined. Like, do I need to trial 2 other systems just for funsies? Like, no, I need to like dive in with a parent and with that whole team and teach them how to utilize this tool. There are, however, other students who come to see me who have a lot more complex profiles. They have complex bodies. We do need to kind of dial in what we're trialing and potentially have different tools. And so what I'm hearing you say is that, we're kind of allocating our time more strategically, and we are utilizing this tool as a way to kind of get access to the kids that are pretty, quote unquote, simple cases. And then for more complex cases, we are able to kind of do further assessment, to trial different things, to figure out, what are the features that are incredibly important for this specific student in front of us. And it just feels a lot more streamlined and strategic with how we're using our time.
Yeah. And I think humility is really important. We can't mind read and figure out a kid's perfect system, no matter how much time we spend with them. And then on top of that, agency is important. So when it's possible, we want to let our AAC users explore and self-select between various options. Mm-hmm. So I feel like AAC assessment is maybe not as precise as it's advertised to be, especially in a world where the features do overlap so much between all of the different apps that we have.
Chris always talks about this. He's like, well, which one did you try first? Like, that matters, right? And then like, what did you try next? And like, kids will learn whatever you put in front of them. And so like, he definitely challenges the idea of kind of a traditional AAC assessment in that way, because it's like those things make a huge difference. And like, it's like feels kind of arbitrary sometimes. Like, well, we're just going to try this one. And then like, I guess we'll try this one. Like, it's just like, I understand the kind of genesis or origin of that came from when we didn't have a lot of access to iPads with speech generating apps. There was kind of a candidacy model for a reason, because not everyone could get, an $8,000 device funded. But now with kind of the iPad being so ubiquitous and reasonably easy to access, things are shifting. And it makes sense that our practices clinically are shifting kind of alongside of that. I'm curious from you guys, we've talked about kind of the benefits with time management and things like that. I also think something like specific language system first and kind of these tiers of support can create a culture around AAC, and it can create more opportunities for classroom staff and professionals to have a sense of AAC, because we are spending more time next to them implementing and teaching and doing those trainings and doing that coaching. So I'm curious, from your perspective over the last year, like, have you seen that culture around AAC build, and have you seen communication partners feel more confident?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that sentiment. One thing I've noticed is that by doing AAC screening and by using this framework, it's just so happened practically that we end up having classrooms that have mostly one system, and at the most maybe 2, right? And so practically speaking, our paraprofessionals and our classroom teachers get a lot more confident with that language system that they're using because they have so many more opportunities to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, maybe Brianna can speak to this a little bit since she's headed up this curriculum like pilot project. But just to speak to it a little bit, by doing AAC screening and having really just one or at the most two language systems in a classroom, we've been able to use curriculum like Tell Me, which incorporates like touch chat, for example, into curriculum and in academics as well. So not only is there a better sort of culture around AAC and staff feel more confident, but we've been able to embed it into curriculum as well a little bit more. Maybe Brianna, you want to talk just a little bit about how those two things have been connected?
Yeah, I think it's so important that we give teachers the resources to just bake AAC into their whole day without having to think about it so much, without having to adapt the materials that they have in front of them. If it's right there already in the design of the lesson, I know you and Chris talk about universal design all the time. That's just so helpful for the staff members and for the students because it's being used throughout their day. So this year we've been piloting the Tell Me program from Attainment Company in one of our preschool classrooms. And of course, that's also a classroom that we're using the AAC screening in. And they're a touch chat classroom. So all the students have a ton of exposure to AAC all day long. All of the paras are modeling for them. The teacher is modeling for them. It's really the ideal thing that we want for our students. And the result from that has been, we have students who are making a ton of progress in communication, but we also see students who are making a ton of progress in literacy. We have 4-year-olds that are reading because they are getting exposure to AAC and core vocabulary and literacy concepts consistently throughout their day. So it's really exciting to watch. And, our parents are thrilled to see the progress their kids are making.
It's like the best case scenario when you hear about a classroom who's just like modeling AAC all day and really integrating all of the kind of work that we do as SLPs. Imagine over time, every year, continuing to refine that, continuing to expand on that. It also makes teachers and classroom staff feel like they're making a difference. It's like we all get into this work because we want to help and we want to teach. And I feel like sometimes it can feel very daunting when you are working with students that have complex communication needs. And again, maybe all the students have different AAC systems and different kind of levels that they're at language-wise, utilizing that AAC. And so to kind of imagine a classroom where the teacher is starting to feel more confident and integrating AAC and literacy and all of those things, it's like, that's what we're all working towards. And again, I think just to reiterate the point, when we spend less of our time in the assessment phase and we can spend more of our time in the implementation, that's when we actually start to see things move and change and shift and our kids start growing and progressing. And that's what we all want.
It's what I live for. It's what Brianna and I text each other about, like these wins that kind of help us keep going. It's what it's all about, for sure.
Yes. Well, I'm really excited to share this resource. You guys are so wonderful for creating it and sharing it. I love that it's a free resource, and I'm excited for our listeners to have access to it. AACscreening.com is the website that you can sign up for. I actually just signed up to get it, so I'm excited. It's still downloading, so I'm excited to dive in. And for our listeners who are wanting to reach out to you guys, where's the best place to find you?
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. You can also find us on the website. So you can email us at info@aacscreening.com. We also have a community forum on the website, so you can sign up for that. It's also free. And then you can share your ideas or how you've decided to implement screening in your school district. And we've had some people reach out, and we've also seen people downloading it from multiple countries around the world. So we're really excited to see exactly like you talked about, Rachel. Can we replicate this, and can we replicate the results in classrooms too?
So, Tiffany, where can people find you?
You can find me at brianna.hughes.slp on Instagram and Facebook. and also my website, briannahugheslp.com.
Perfect. Tiffany, where can people find you?
You can find me also on Instagram and Facebook at Technology Voices AAC. And my website is technologyvoicesaac.com.
Perfect. We will definitely link to those in the show notes. Thank you guys so much. I'm so sad Chris wasn't able to be here. Let me just call that out for a second. We tried to coordinate it with Chris, but we were like traversing multiple time zones, and I know he will be very excited to listen to this episode. He was sad that he couldn't be here, and I just know that he is so excited that this concept that he kind of dove into years ago at this point is just really gaining a lot of traction, and are really sparking individuals like you guys to create resources and, you know, kind of take this idea and really run with it. And so I know he'll be excited to hear about this and to dive into the screening tool. And yeah, I'm just like sad that he couldn't be here with us.
We missed you, Chris.
We are too.
Yes. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to share all your ideas. I'm excited to share this episode. I'm excited to have people explore the tool and add it as a resource to their toolkit when they're trying to kind of expand and shift the culture around AAC and kind of the practices clinically that they are doing when it comes to AAC assessment. So thank you guys again for sharing your time and sharing this resource.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For Talking with Tech, I'm Rachel Madel, joined by Brianna Hughes and Tiffany Rezvani. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.